So, I want you to start by just closing your eyes for a second. Just imagine you are standing inside this massive high-security vault.
Right, but we should clarify, this isn't like a bank vault filled with cash or gold bullion.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a bank vault. The walls around you are thick, solid steel, and the air inside is kept rigidly, artificially locked at a constant minus 40 degrees Celsius.
Which is, I mean, that is absolute punishing cold.
It is a sub-zero ice chamber. It is so cold that every breath you take basically feels like inhaling ground glass. So imagine that sitting right in the center of this freezing room on a perfectly sculpted block of glacial ice is a billionaire.
Well, there was a billionaire.
Right, was. Because right now, resting in his exact place on that pristine ice is nothing but a mound of pure white bone ash.
Which right away presents this profound, almost aggressive physical contradiction. I mean, reducing a mature human body to pure calcined ash is not a gentle process.
No, not all.
It requires temperatures that are significantly hotter than what you would find in a commercial industrial incinerator.
We are talking about a roaring, blinding inferno, and yet, this is the detail that is really going to stick with you. The block of crystal clear ice that this man was sitting on hasn't melted a single millimeter.
Not one drop of water.
Exactly. Because to solve the murder of Sir Alistair Vance, investigators basically had to completely throw out the rule book of standard thermodynamics.
It is the ultimate locker room mystery, honestly. But it's elevated to this level of scientific impossibility that just completely paralyzed the forensic teams who first breached those doors.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, the initial reports, they read less like a crime scene analysis and more like, a breakdown of localized physics.
So today, we are unpacking this extraordinary, highly classified case dossier. Our mission for this deep dive is to step inside the seemingly impossible room, analyze a set of deeply contradictory testimonies, and ultimately decode the terrifying physics engine that made this execution possible.
Because as you'll see, this isn't just a true crime puzzle. This is a terrifying masterclass in thermodynamics, molecular chemistry, and really weaponized environment design.
Weaponized environment design. That is such a wild concept.
Right. The environment itself is essentially the primary suspect.
Yeah.
What looks like absolute magic to the untrained eye is actually a demonstration of highly advanced, meticulously calculated science.
Yeah.
There's a mechanical, rational explanation for this paradox. But discovering it requires us to fundamentally rethink how temperature, energy, and molecular resonance operate in the physical world around us.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because by the end of this deep dive, I promise you an aha moment that is going to completely change how you look at the invisible forces surrounding you every single day. Let's lay out the foundational facts of the scene.
That's a good place to start.
The date is January 14th, 2026. The time is exactly 02:14 a.m. The victim is Sir Alistair Vance, a 58-year-old diamond tycoon whose corporate empire spans 3 continents.
Right, and he is found dead in Chamber O7 of the Arctic Glacier Exhibition Hall.
The physical environment of Chamber O7 is critical to understand here. This wasn't just a chilly room in a museum.
No, it was an isolated, heavily insulated ice vault. It was designed specifically to showcase ultra-pure glacial ice sculptures. So to maintain the structural and visual integrity of that ice, the ambient temperature wasn't just low, it was aggressively maintained.
Locked at minus 40 degrees Celsius, which, by the way, is minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit as well, for those wondering. It just happens to be the exact point on the thermometer where the 2 scales meet.
Which is fascinating in its own right. But yes, absolute punishing cold, the kind of cold where exposed skin begins to suffer frostbite in literally minutes.
And Sir Alistair entered this chamber alone at 01:45 a.m. He was there for a highly exclusive private viewing of the exhibition's centerpiece, which was a $50 million diamond-encrusted ice crown.
So he enters this completely sealed, hyper-controlled biome. The chamber is monitored constantly by external thermosensors, basically ensuring the climate control is flawless.
And the doors, right, the doors are intense.
Oh, absolutely. The doors are triple-sealed pressure doors, meaning once they close, the room is essentially a hermetic environment.
So for about 30 minutes, everything is quiet, nothing happens. But then, at 02:14 a.m., the security team executes a routine check. They open those heavy pressure doors, and Sir Alistair is just gone.
Vanished.
In his place, sitting directly on top of the pristine ice pedestal where he was supposed to be standing, is a perfect, undisturbed mound of calcined human bone ash. And resting perfectly on top of that brilliant white powder is his platinum wedding ring.
It's a striking, almost theatrical image, but from a purely scientific standpoint, it is a living nightmare for an investigator.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Yeah, when the primary forensic sweep team arrived at 02:00 a.m., the data they collected created this matrix of physical anomalies that directly conflicted with theoretical physics. Let's look at the thermal requirements you mentioned earlier.
Right, because it's like detonating a bomb inside a snow globe, and when the smoke clears, not a single snowflake has melted. How does that even happen? Because human cremation requires serious, sustained energy, right?
Enormous amounts of energy. I mean, standard human cremation requires raging, sustained heat between 1400 and 1800 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow, that is incredibly hot.
And it doesn't happen in an instant either. That temperature has to be maintained for at least 2 hours.
2 hours of just a roaring fire.
Exactly. That is the sheer amount of thermal energy required to evaporate the water in the body, burn away all organic tissue, combust the bone marrow, and finally calcine the hydroxyapatite in the bones into that pure, fragile white ash you described.
So, okay, if there was a fire inside Chamber O7 burning at 1800 degrees for 2 hours.
The chamber would have been completely unrecognizable. I mean, the ice pedestal Alistair was sitting on should have been reduced to a puddle of boiling water in a matter of seconds.
Right.
The walls, which were coated in decorative frost, should have been completely stripped bare. Yet, the forensic data shows the ice substrate was perfectly crystallized, solid ice. There were absolutely zero signs of melting,
Not at all.
zero structural deformation at the contact point where the ash rested.
I read in the dossier that the ice even retained the microscopic chisel marks from the sculptor who carved it. Like, not even the top molecular layer of the ice was smoothed out by the heat. That is mind-bending.
That specific detail, the microscopic chisel marks, is what really sent the forensic technicians into a tailspin. Furthermore, they ran atmospheric and humidity diagnostics. There was 0.0% liquid water on the chamber floor.
Wait, zero?
Zero. The vaporization of the surrounding frost on the walls was entirely absent, and the atmospheric sensors inside the vault came back completely clean.
Meaning no smoke whatsoever.
None. They detected absolutely no carbon monoxide, no carbon dioxide spikes, and no smoke particulates. Conventional combustion gases were entirely undetectable.
So we have no fire, no smoke, no melting ice, and no water. Just a billionaire turned to dust in a freezing room. If the internal sensors didn't pick up a raging inferno, what did they pick up? There had to be some sort of data trail.
Well, there was one single glaring anomaly, but it came from the external thermosensors monitoring the vault's core systems, not the internal smoke detectors.
Okay, what did they see?
The logs recorded an instantaneous microscopic spike in the internal core temperature. This happened at exactly 01:55 a.m. The temperature in the room jumped from minus 40 degrees Celsius to minus 38.2 degrees Celsius.
A jump of just 1.8 degrees.
And it lasted for precisely 1.8 seconds before immediately dropping back down, flatlining at minus 40 again.
Wait, I want to pause on this. A 1.8 degree temperature spike lasting less than 2 seconds. That is the smoking gun, isn't it? That completely eliminates the possibility of fire.
What's fascinating here is how that microscopic data point basically reorients the entire investigation. You cannot achieve calcined bone ash with a 1.8 degree temperature shift lasting less than 2 seconds. It completely violates the conservation of energy.
It's impossible.
Right. If it wasn't fire, what invisible mechanism could possibly reduce a grown man to dust in under 2 seconds without bleeding heat into the surrounding environment?
And if the temperature spiked, someone had to have messed with the climate control, right? Which means we have to pull back from the physical impossibility of the room and look at the people surrounding it.
Exactly, the human element.
If the room itself didn't spontaneously combust him, someone orchestrated this. And the dossier introduces us to 3 primary suspects who were in the building that night.
This is where it shifts from a physics problem to a complex web of institutional access. Like, who has the keys to a room like this? Who understands the systems well enough to manipulate them?
Which leads investigators straight to suspect A, Dr. Marcus Vance. He is Sir Alistair's biological nephew, which obviously immediately brings family dynamics into play.
Always does.
But far more importantly for this locked room mystery, Dr. Vance is the exhibition's cryogenic engineer. He personally designed and currently maintains the massive cooling systems that keep Chamber 07 at minus 40.
Which puts him in a very unique, highly suspicious position. He understands the thermodynamics of that room and the facility's underlying infrastructure better than anyone alive.
In his interrogation, Marcus leans heavily on that exact expertise. He insists, almost aggressively, that cremating a man to ash in that vault without melting the room is physically impossible.
Which is technically true under normal conditions.
Right. He tells the detectives, look at the basic laws of thermodynamics. If my uncle had been burned by fire, the thermal radiation would have turned that entire ice palace into a boiling swimming pool within 90 seconds.
He is using his scientific background to logically distance himself from the crime scene. He is establishing an alibi based entirely on the laws of physics.
So his theory is that the actual murder happened elsewhere. He claims someone must have somehow smuggled his uncle's body out of the room and replaced it with fake industrial ash.
But Marcus's theory of a body swap doesn't really align with his own actions that night. The facility's security logs show that Marcus accessed the cooling mainframe at 01:0 a.m., just 45 minutes before the temperature anomaly.
Right, the logs show he made a highly specific adjustment to the system's frequency modulation. When the police questioned him about this, he claims it was just, standard maintenance to compensate for the blizzard outside.
A cryogenic engineer tampering with the cooling mainframe's frequency modulation right before an impossible thermal event occurs inside the vault he built. I mean, that is a massive red flag.
Huge. But wait, if Marcus's theory is right and the body was swapped, someone had to have seen it happen. Was anyone watching the room?
That brings us to the second testimony, which fundamentally shatters Marcus's theory of a smuggled body.
Suspect B, Vivian Cross. She is the art curator for the exhibition, and interestingly, she's also a trained glaciologist.
Which, a glaciologist curating an ultra-pure ice sculpture exhibit makes perfect sense. Her presence there is entirely justified. What defies logic is what she claims to have witnessed.
During her interrogation, Vivian states that she was standing in the hallway, looking directly through the triple-pane viewing glass of Chamber 07 the entire time.
She had a clear line of sight.
She swears that the room never went dark, the lights never flickered, and she absolutely never saw any flames or smoke. But her account of what happened at exactly 01:55 a.m., which is the exact moment of that 1.8-second temperature spike, is completely chilling.
She provides a visual account of an event that shouldn't be visually possible.
She says that at 01:55 a.m., the white ice sculpture behind Alistair stopped reflecting his shadow. For a split second, she claims Alistair's body glowed with a faint, beautiful violet luminescence from inside his heavy winter coat.
Violet luminescence.
Yeah, she actually described it to the police as looking like a deep-sea jellyfish. And then he simply collapsed into a cloud of white dust. No smoke, no sound, just silent vaporization.
Silent vaporization. It's an incredibly poetic description of a deeply gruesome event. But crucially, it directly contradicts Marcus's theory of body swap.
Right.
Vivienne is stating on the record that the transformation from human to ash happened right there in the room, right in front of her eyes, in less than 2 seconds.
I have to admit, if I'm a detective hearing this, I'm thinking she's lying or hallucinating. A glowing ghost. How does that work? And then you dig into her background, and she has a massive, glaring motive to lie.
Oh, she definitely has a motive.
The investigators found that her grandfather lost his entire mining claim to Alistair Vance 30 years ago. Alistair used incredibly predatory corporate tactics to basically bankrupt her family.
So we have an eyewitness who describes a physically impossible bioluminescent death, who also happens to have a deep-seated, multi-generational grudge against the victim. Her testimony is definitely compromised by her motive.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and where I have to push back on this entire narrative. Are we genuinely supposed to believe a jellyfish glowing ghost vaporized a billionaire while the curator just watched?
It sounds absurd on its face.
And more importantly, if this room is so highly secure, how did the killer get in? Who was guarding this door?
That is the domain of Suspect C Inspector Thomas Jin, the head of exhibition security. He's the one personally responsible for the integrity of that vault.
And Jin's testimony is entirely focused on how infallible his security systems are. He tells the police that the security mainframe is completely unhackable. The pressure doors on Chamber 07 aren't just locked with a key, they are biometric.
Right, which is a huge detail.
They require a live palm vein scan from Alistair himself to lock or unlock from the inside.
And vein mapping is significantly more secure than a standard fingerprint. It requires active blood flow to register, meaning you can't just use a severed hand or a forged print.
Wow, okay, so Jin insists that nobody entered after Alistair and nobody left. The heavy vacuum seal on the chamber remained entirely unbroken until his own security team opened it at 02:14 a.m. to discover the remains.
Which leaves him with very few explanations.
Jin's conclusion is practically a surrender. He tells the detectives, if you are looking for a killer, you are looking for a ghost who can walk through solid steel walls at sub-zero temperatures.
He is retreating behind the supposed perfection of his system. But forensic science doesn't rely on testimonies. It relies on trace evidence. And Jin's system wasn't as flawless as he claimed.
I'm not buying this perfectly sealed story either. The detectives didn't either. When the forensic team did their sweeps of the personnel, they found a highly unusual electromagnetic residual charge right on Thomas Jin's master security keycard.
An electromagnetic charge on a simple RFID keycard in a facility that shouldn't be generating anomalous, high-voltage electromagnetic fields. That is the thread that really unravels the entire mystery.
So we have a room that didn't melt, a 1.8-second temperature spike, a nephew tampering with cooling frequencies, a curator seeing violet light, and a security chief with an electromagnetically charged keycard. None of this fits together naturally.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, a distinct pattern begins to emerge from these seemingly disparate clues. Strip away the alibis, the finger-pointing, and the family drama. Just look only at the physical phenomena being described.
Okay, looking at the physics.
We have a frequency modulation in the mainframe, we have an electromagnetic charge, and we have a chemical violet luminescence.
Wait, are you saying these aren't just weird coincidences?
Exactly. What we are actually looking at are the mechanical components of the murder weapon itself.
Oh.
These aren't just contradictory statements. They are the fragmented blueprints of a terrifyingly advanced physics engine. To understand how Alistair Vance was killed, we have to pivot away from a traditional murder mystery and dive deep into some incredibly high-level molecular science.
Okay, I'm following you. But how does a ghost leave an electromagnetic charge and glow violet?
By not being a ghost at all. The investigative breakthrough in the dossier comes when the forensic team realizes they aren't dealing with fire and they aren't dealing with a smuggled body.
Right.
They're looking at a highly targeted application of molecular resonance that completely bypasses standard thermodynamics. And the first piece of that weapon was worn by the victim himself.
The coat. Sir Alistair's luxury thermal winter coat.
This is the first half of the weapon system, the chemical catalyst. During a secondary microscopic sweep of the bone ash, the forensic electromagnetic sensors picked up trace amounts of a very specific, highly volatile compound bound to the surviving synthetic fibers of that coat.
It was an ultra-concentrated layer of something called liquid peroxymonosulfuric acid. I looked this up. It's more commonly known in chemistry circles as Caro's acid. Why on earth would a billionaire's coat be lined with industrial acid?
Because Caro's acid is an incredibly powerful, highly reactive oxidizing agent. On an electron level, an oxidizing agent forces other substances to lose electrons rapidly, which usually results in a violent release of energy.
So it's basically a bomb.
Under normal room temperature circumstances, concentrated Caro's acid is highly volatile. It can cause explosive reactions when it comes into contact with organic material.
So if it's that explosive, how did he even put the coat on without blowing up in his hotel room?
Because the killer didn't just pour raw acid into the lining. They synthesized a chemical cocktail. They mixed this Caro's acid with a stabilized carbon nanotube binding agent.
Okay, a binding agent.
This nanotube scaffold acted as a molecular cage, stabilizing the acid just enough to be painted into the fabric.
But even stabilized, it's still acid.
That is where the environment comes into play. What's crucial to understand about this specific compound is how it behaves in extreme cold. At the minus 40 degrees Celsius rigidly maintained inside chamber 07, the kinetic energy of the molecules drops so low that the acid becomes completely dormant.
It just freezes.
It is chemically inert, it is invisible, odorless, and poses absolutely zero danger to the wearer.
Let me get this straight. Alistair puts on this coat in his warm hotel room. Wait, no, it would have to be applied right before he entered the cold environment, or the coat itself would have to be kept cold.
The dossier actually notes the coat was kept in the facility's refrigerated cloakroom.
Ah, okay, so he puts on this chilled coat, walks into the freezing vault, and he has no idea he is essentially wearing a dormant chemical bomb. The extreme cold of the room is actually the safety mechanism keeping the acid stable.
Exactly.
It was a booby trap just waiting for a trigger.
Precisely. And that trigger is the second half of the weapon system. The killer needed an invisible force that could instantaneously activate that dormant acid without raising the ambient temperature of the room and melting the ice.
We established earlier that the killer didn't use a flamethrower. But when investigators finally tore down the walls of Chamber 07, hiding behind the fiberglass structural scaffolding, they found an industrial-grade directed energy emitter,
Right.
specifically a massive magnetron.
A magnetron is a high-powered vacuum tube. It generates microwaves using the interaction of a stream of electrons with a magnetic field. To put it simply, it's the exact same core technology that powers the microwave oven sitting in your kitchen right now, but scaled up to a massive industrial military-grade level.
Hold on, I need to push back on this. A giant industrial microwave hidden in the wall. How did a massive machine like that not draw colossal amounts of power that would immediately trip the facility's security grid?
That is the big question.
Jin said his system monitors everything. I'm not buying that the security mainframe wouldn't catch a power surge of that magnitude.
That is a brilliant point, and it connects directly back to Thomas Jin's keycard. The emitter didn't draw power from the main grid. It was wired directly into the localized high-voltage lines that power the biometric pressure doors.
Oh, wow.
But to siphon that power without triggering an alarm, the killer had to physically bypass the localized circuit breaker.
Using Jin's master key card.
Exactly. The electromagnetic residual charge found on Jin's card wasn't an anomaly, it was the footprint of the bypass. Someone stole or cloned Jin's card, used it to bridge the circuit, and fed mass amounts of unregistered power directly into the hidden magnetron.
Okay, that makes sense of the power draw, but it still doesn't explain the physics. If you put a block of ice in a kitchen microwave and turn it on, the ice eventually melts. How did this massive emitter fire into the room and leave the $50 million ice pedestal perfectly intact?
Because of the incredibly precise calibration of the emitter, a standard kitchen microwave operates at around 2.45 gigahertz. That specific frequency is chosen by appliance manufacturers because it effectively excites liquid water molecules.
Right.
It causes the dipoles in the water to rapidly flip back and forth billions of times a second, creating molecular friction and heat, which is what cooks your food.
But the emitter hidden in Chamber 07 wasn't operating at 2.45 gigahertz. The logs showed it was heavily modified and precision calibrated to a hyperspecific frequency, 9.45 gigahertz.
This is where the atomic deception occurs, and it is a fascinating exploitation of physical chemistry. At exactly 9.45 gigahertz, this specific microwave radiation completely ignores H2O molecules when they are locked in a solid state.
Meaning ice and frost.
Correct. Imagine a crowd of people tightly packed together, shoulder to shoulder, in a frozen formation. A standard beat, like 2.45 gigahertz, tries to make them dance.
Okay, I like this analogy.
But because they're locked in an ice crystal lattice, they can't move freely, so they just vibrate slightly, slowly warming up and melting. But 9.45 gigahertz is different. It's like playing a hyper-specific, ultra-high-pitched tone.
The crowd doesn't dance to it.
Exactly. The molecular structure of the frozen water simply doesn't resonate at 9.45 gigahertz. The microwaves pass right through the rigid hexagonal crystal lattice of the ice without causing the water molecules to flip or vibrate.
And no vibration means no heat.
Right. No vibration means absolutely no kinetic friction. And no friction means zero heat transfer. Not a single watt of energy is absorbed by the ice.
It just passes right through the pedestal and the frosted walls like light shining through a clear glass window. That explains why the chisel marks were completely untouched. But if the ice is ignoring the microwaves, what is catching all that colossal energy?
Organic carbon-hydrogen bonds, human tissue, and, critically, the Caro's acid catalyst laced into the carbon nanotube lining of the coat. While the ice is transparent in 9.45 gigahertz, complex organic matter and that specific chemical compound are highly opaque to it.
So they absorb it instead.
They absorb that specific frequency of energy violently and instantaneously.
Okay, I want to take all of this science and map it onto the timeline. Let's go back to exactly 01.55 a.m., the moment Vivian is looking through the glass. The moment of the 1.8-second anomaly, this is the exact moment the trap is sprung.
The emitter hidden behind the wall is activated remotely. For exactly 1.8 seconds, a massive concentrated beam of 9.45 gigahertz microwave radiation completely floods the sealed chamber.
Walk us through the physical reality of what happens inside Chamber 07 in those 1.8 seconds, microsecond by microsecond.
It is an instantaneous, catastrophic, intramolecular friction event. The microwaves wash over the room, passing harmlessly through the ice pedestal. But when they hit Alistair Vance, the radiation violently couples with the organic carbon-hydrogen bonds in his body and, simultaneously, the dormant Caro's acid in his coat.
The acid wakes up.
The microwaves inject massive kinetic energy into the acid, shattering its dormant state. It instantly acts as a hyperaccelerant. It becomes a catalyst that exponentially multiplies the thermal reaction at the atomic level. The acid rapidly oxidizes the organic material of his clothing and skin.
And that rapid chemical oxidation, that's the violet glow Vivienne saw.
Yes.
The chemical luminescence of the acid reacting. It wasn't a ghost. It was a visible chemical reaction happening right before he died.
Exactly. The extreme sudden oxidation caused by the Caro's acid triggering under heavy microwave bombardment produces a very distinct, faint violet luminescence. It glowed just beneath the fabric of his coat for a fraction of a second.
And then the true horror happens.
Because the energy from the magnetron is so intense, and the 9.45 gigahertz frequency is so perfectly targeted at his biology, Alistair's atomic structure begins to carbonize from the inside out.
The human body is mostly water. What happens to the water inside his cells?
Because it is liquid water inside a warm living body, not frozen ice, it absorbs the energy. It is instantly vaporized.
Yeah.
The sheer pressure of the steam shatters his cellular structures simultaneously. He doesn't burn from the outside in like in a fire. The energy excites every single molecule in his body at once.
He collapses directly into calcined bone ash in 1.8 seconds.
It happens so fast that the phenomenal heat generated internally doesn't even have time to conduct outward through the air and melt the ice substrate he is sitting on. The thermodynamic transfer is completely internalized.
What about the temperature spike?
The 1.8-degree temperature spike that the external sensors recorded. That was just the microscopic thermal bleed-off, a tiny burp of heat escaping from his instant vaporization before the room's cooling system immediately crushed it back down to -40.
Execution by atomic resonance. So what does this all mean? I want you listening to this to just sit back and imagine the sheer, terrifying brilliance of this setup.
It really is brilliant.
The killer managed to turn Chamber 07 into a highly targeted, weaponized microwave oven. An oven that was specifically tuned to completely ignore frozen water, but to friction cook human biology and highly reactive acid in under 2 seconds.
It is a breathtaking application of physics used for a truly malicious purpose. It completely circumvents the traditional obstacles of a locked room murder. There was no physical weapon brought into the room by a killer. There was no poison slipped into a drink that a toxicologist could easily find. There was no fire started that would trigger sprinklers or leave smoke damage.
The killer simply introduced a dormant chemical in a coat, bypassed a localized breaker with a stolen keycard, and then bathed the room in an invisible wave of energy that only targeted the victim. It is immaculate.
Which brings us to a massive pivot in our analysis. We spent a lot of time on the how. How did the ice not melt? How did the body turn to ash? But a weapon this unbelievably complex, requiring this level of structural glaciology, molecular chemistry, and thermodynamic engineering, this isn't created by a common street criminal looking for a quick payday.
No, you don't build a 9.45 gigahertz directed energy weapon just to steal a diamond crown, because the crown was left completely untouched.
Right.
This kind of elaborate, hyper-specific death trap is born from deep systemic trauma and unparalleled expertise. We have to ask, who has the capability to do this, and why did they do it?
This raises an important question about the psychology of the killer. To understand the motive, we have to dig into the fourth layer of the case dossier, which outlines the dark history surrounding Sir Alistair Vance's corporate empire.
The dossier traces the origin of this molecular weapon back a full decade to the year 2016. And we have to travel away from this pristine art exhibition thousands of miles away to a black-budget military and corporate research lab located deep in the frozen tundra of Siberia.
At that facility in Siberia, a specialized team of researchers was conducting highly advanced deep frost survival experiments. These were scientists pushing the absolute boundaries of human endurance, testing new thermal materials, and exploring cryogenic technology for long-term deep space travel.
But their research wasn't government-funded. It was bankrolled by a massive conglomerate owned entirely by Sir Alistair Vance.
Right.
And in the winter of 2016, a catastrophic polar storm, a once-in-a-generation blizzard, hit the Siberian facility. The power grid failed. The researchers were stranded in temperatures that plunged well below -60 degrees Celsius. They needed immediate, highly expensive, militarized aerial extraction to survive.
But the order for that extraction never came. The dossier reveals that as the storm raged, Alistair Vance himself sat in a warm boardroom and made a direct, calculated corporate cost-cutting decision.
Unbelievable.
He looked at the price tag of deploying specialized helicopters into a superstorm, deemed the rescue operation too expensive, and essentially wrote off the research team as a financial loss on a spreadsheet. The researchers were abandoned to the storm.
I cannot imagine the physiological terror of that. Freezing to death is a brutal, agonizing process. Your body violently shivers to generate heat, your extremities go numb as blood rushes to your organs, and eventually hypothermia induces confusion, paradoxical undressing, and terminal burrowing before your heart simply stops.
It's horrific.
They all froze to death in that lab. And among the scientists who perished in that absolute unyielding cold was a brilliant female chemical physicist.
Which is where the seeds of this intricate revenge plot were planted. Because that brilliant chemical physicist, who died entirely due to Alistair Vance's greed, had a son.
A son who would spend the next 10 years of his life dedicating every waking moment, every ounce of his intellect, to studying molecular acoustics, structural glaciology, and thermodynamics.
He became an unparalleled expert in the exact fields necessary to manipulate cold, frequency, and chemical resonance. He became an engineer so skilled that he eventually landed the highly lucrative contract to meticulously design the entire cooling and security matrix of the Arctic Glacier Exhibition Hall.
Dr. Marcus Vance, the nephew.
It is the only logical conclusion when you synthesize the data. He had the high-level administrative access to the mainframe, which perfectly explains his log of adjusting the frequency modulation at 01.10 a.m. He was tuning the system to handle the massive thermal bleed-off from the impending execution.
He also had the architectural ability to plant the massive magnetron emitter behind the fiberglass walls during the actual construction phase of the chamber months prior. And he had the profound decade-long motive.
Exactly.
But hold on, if Marcus had all this access, if he literally designed the security systems and could clone Jin's keycard, why go through this insane theatrical production?
It does seem like a lot of work.
He could have just locked Alistair in the vault, overridden the biometric doors, and slowly lowered the temperature until he froze to death. He could have just shot him in the parking garage. Why spend 10 years building an invisible 9.45 gigahertz atomic weapon?
Because for the architect of this crime, a simple murder wasn't enough. A bullet wouldn't balance the scales. This was about narrative symmetry. It was about profound poetic justice.
Poetic justice.
Alistair Vance built his massive fortune on ruthless extraction and corporate cruelty, leaving people to die in the freezing cold simply to protect his bottom line. Marcus wanted his uncle to be executed by the exact same element that was weaponized against his mother.
But he didn't freeze him. He burned him.
He did both. He took absolute unyielding cold, the very environment that slowly killed his mother, and he used it as the necessary catalyst for the weapon. Without the sub-zero temperatures, the Caros acid couldn't be stabilized. The cold was the trap.
Oh, wow.
He took the cold and transformed it, inverted it, into a weapon of silent, instantaneous atomic burning.
And he did it while Alistair was sitting completely alone, admiring a $50 million diamond-encrusted ice crown. A crown made of the very ice that killed the researchers, adorned with the diamonds that built Alistair's bloody empire.
It's all connected.
The imagery is impossible to ignore. It is a stark, glittering symbol of the greed that started this entire chain of events 10 years ago in Siberia.
It perfectly encapsulates the dual nature of technology and scientific knowledge. Marcus Vance used incredibly beautiful, elegant science. The manipulation of electromagnetic waves, the resonance of carbon-hydrogen bonds, the molecular lattice of ice to commit a brutal, targeted execution. It shows that physics and chemistry are inherently indifferent. They're tools.
Which brings us back to you, listening to this deep dive right now. Because reading through a dossier like this, it fundamentally shifts your perspective on the built environment around you. We walk through the modern world every single day, completely trusting the invisible systems that govern our spaces.
We really do.
We trust the climate control in our offices not to suffocate us. We trust the security sensors and the biometric scanners in our buildings to keep us safe.
We view these technologies as benign infrastructure. But this case reminds us that technology is entirely neutral. It has no moral compass. It is only human intent that gives it a purpose. A cooling mainframe is just a machine to preserve art until someone decides to modulate its frequency to hide a thermal spike.
Right.
An RFID keycard is just a piece of plastic until someone clones it to bypass a circuit breaker.
And a luxury winter coat is just clothing until someone weaves a dormant, highly reactive acid into its lining. It really forces you to ask, what else is hiding in plain sight?
I want to leave you with a chilling final concept to mull over. We live in a world that is overflowing with interconnected smart devices. Our homes, our offices, our cities are completely saturated with directed energy emitters.
Saturated.
The 9.45 gigahertz frequency used in this murder isn't science fiction. It is remarkably close to the frequencies used in modern X-band radar, satellite communications, and even certain high-band 5G networks.
The invisible waves are literally everywhere. We are swimming in them.
Exactly. Everything from your home Wi-Fi router to the millimeter wave anti-theft scanners at the grocery store to the phone in your pocket operates on electromagnetic resonance. So consider the dual-use capabilities of these everyday innocuous technologies.
That's a scary thought.
If a pristine, freezing exhibition room can be secretly repurposed into a targeted molecular incinerator with just a specific frequency and a chemical catalyst, what invisible frequencies are passing through you right now?
It's unsettling to think about.
What harmless waves are bouncing off your skin, passing through the walls of your home, silently resonating through your environment, just waiting for someone to introduce the right catalyst?
It definitely makes you look at your kitchen microwave and your Wi-Fi router a little differently, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We love unpacking these mind-bending intersections of science, physics, and human nature with you. Stay curious, keep questioning the invisible systems around you, and remember, the next time you find yourself in a room where the temperature feels just a little too perfectly controlled, or you see a shadow that doesn't quite make sense, always question the impossible. Because sometimes a perfectly unmelted piece of ice is the most dangerous clue of all.